Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Wells, and I am an author. I write horror, science fiction, and fantasy. I'm also the game master for the Twitch stream Typecast RPG, and I am also kind of a game maniac. And so I'm starting what I hope will be a long series of video reviews of RPGs. I used to review games way back in the early days of the internet, and I haven't in a while, but I want to again. So, assuming that all works well, here we go. Today I want to talk about Star Trek Adventures, which is one of my very favorite role-playing games, and it is um, the best Star Trek game I've ever played in any medium. It does a fantastic job of duplicating the feel of Star Trek. One thing that I think Star Trek misses a lot, especially when people try to turn it into a board game, is that it mostly turns into a war game. And while there are fights in Star Trek, that's not what Star Trek's really about, at least not for me. Role playing games have an easier time of doing that, and Star Trek Adventures, in particular, does a really fantastic job of giving you all the tools that you need to solve puzzles and problems in a way that something like D&D doesn't. D&D is awesome and I love it. I'm not trying to bag on the game. I'm just saying that this system has a different purpose and the mechanics serve a different function, and it's awesome. So we'll take a look at it really quick. Um, this is it. It's from Modifius. Modifius does the 2d20 system, and so they have Conan, and they've got Star Trek, they've got John Carter, and we'll be looking at all of those eventually. They also have some other non 2d20 games, but here, let's take a look at the character sheet. Um, so the way that most 2d20 games work is that you've got a set of attributes here, and you've got a set of disciplines, and you'll have ranks in those usually from 1 to 5. And if something you need to roll on something, you will combine an attribute and a discipline. So if you want to like fire a phaser, that would be something like daring and security. And so if you've got 3 dice in daring and 4 dice in security, then you roll. Then you get. That's good. They're not dice. I apologize. They're ranks. It's a 2d20 system. You roll 2d20s, and you are trying to roll under that rank. And I've just completely botched all of the numbers here. So having 3 ranks in daring and 4 in security would give you a 7, and on those 2d20s you would have to roll under 7. I don't know what game I was thinking of when I started describing this. You're more likely to get up into like 12 or 15, and you have to roll under that for your really, really great skills. You will also have things like focuses over here. So, like, if you're the engineer and you're trying to do something, trying to fix the warp core, let's say that you have to roll under a 12 because of the ranks you have in your attributes and in your disciplines. But if you've also got a focus in warp core dynamics or something like that, then that gives you the extra ability to crit and get extra successes. And the 2d20 system also has some various like currencies that you can use, such as momentum. Momentum are points you can get from getting extra successes and from doing some other things, and then you can spend those momentum to give yourself extra dice on a check. So you might end up rolling, 3, 4, even 5 dice, and then the number of successes that you get determines whether or not you're able to do the thing. So that's kind of the basic system. And I absolutely botched the description of it, and I apologize. It's a wonderful system, just trust me. Momentum and its kind of counter currency, which is called some other thing. It's a different thing in every game. The game master has their own kind of evil version of momentum that's called heat in some of the games, and it's called I don't know what they call it in this one. It has been a couple of weeks, and I have played some other D20 games since my last game of this, and all of a sudden I can't remember what they call it. So we're going to look it up. In fact, here, I'll look it up on the PDF so you can join me. So here we go. Threat. That's what it's called, is threat. Okay? So as you go through, thank you, Alan, threat. As you go through the game, you will encounter different scenes and situations, and you've got your little pool of momentum that the players can use. And then the game master has a pool of threat that he or she can use to do things to the players. And so let's say that we'll go back to the warp core problem that I was describing earlier. There's a scene, something's going on in main engineering, and the game master will start by kind of establishing that scene and say, okay, here are the problems. The warp core is going to fail, and that's going to take, you know, this many successes on your engineering roll in order to succeed. But also because of that, all the alarms are going off and the sound is blinking, and that's kind of an extra complication that will make things more difficult for you. Also, on top of that, the breach in the warp core is venting some kind of toxic gas into main engineering, and so that is causing an extra problem. That's an extra complication, and the game master can kind of spend threat to stack all these complications up and present what's almost at that point like a puzzle box. The characters know what the problems are, they know what the complications are, and then they know the tools that they have to solve it. And so then they can kind of look at each thing in turn and say, well, it will be a lot easier to solve, you know, the actual warp core problem if we can tap down that leak first. And so what will it take to get rid of that? And they can use momentum to kind of get rid of the complication altogether. They can use their skills to deal with it. And so, you know, it's kind of piece by piece, they'll go about solving this. And it really does a fantastic job of recreating the feel of a Star Trek scene, of a Star Trek show. One of the things that I want to show off here is, let's have a look at the character creation. Because, you know, now that you know a little bit about how the system works, the character creation I find to be really compelling. It's got a life path system that builds on, you know, you kind of go through the life of your character to a certain degree while you're creating a character, which is fun. Yeah, and Alan is just mentioned that I should show you this thing that I'm showing you right here. They've got a really great online oh, and I'm not showing it to you right now. I need to change my scene. Boom! There we go. That's the thing that I thought I was showing you. Okay? So they have a really fantastic online character creator, and they have one of these for most of their 2D20 games. They've got a really fantastic one for Infinity. They've got a Conan one, and this is the Star Trek one. So let's take a look at it. We're going to make a character. We are going to just use all of the source books so we can click that. And we'll say we're going to make a next-gen era character. And it's going to be Starfleet personnel. So we get to select a species. And this species, let's go for a Bajoran, because I love Bajorans. They are going to get bonuses to their control, daring, and insight attributes. And then they'll have the opportunity to choose some of these extra talents. So we'll just click that. So there we go. All of the attributes start at 7, and then they, you know, Bajorans get a boost to these particular ones. They have Bajoran as a trait. Now, traits in the game don't have a direct mechanical effect. Like being a Bajoran doesn't give you, I don't know what I'm saying. But what they do is they allow both the players and the game master to tag those traits when they're trying to create complications or opportunities by spending threat and momentum. So if you're able to say, well, in this scene, I'm trying to talk to this person and I'm trying to convince them of something. If the person you're trying to convince is a Bajoran, then you could kind of tag your own trait as a Bajoran and say, we're the same species, we have a shared cultural context, it's going to be easier for me to talk to them, and so that's going to make this easier. And then GM's like, okay, that makes perfect sense. Alternately, if the person you're trying to convince is, for example, a Cardassian, then the GM can tag that and say, well, you're a Bajoran, he's a Cardassian, that's going to make it a lot harder for you. And so there's a lot of traits. Species is just one of them. You get to choose a talent, and talents are more directly mechanical than the traits are. So, for example, let's scroll down, see if I can find the cool. So, the Bajoran ones, you've got Strong Pog. I don't know how to pronounce that. Which will give you a neat thing. So, whenever you attempt a task to resist being coerced or threatened, you reduce the difficulty of the task by 1. So, there's some species-specific ones. So instead of having to get 3 successes, for example, you'd only have to get 2 because Bajorans have great faith if you choose that one. You could choose something else, and they've got a long list of them, especially because I selected all of the various supplements. We'll just, for the sake of argument, choose that one and then move on. So this is where we get into more of the life path kind of system, where you are, where did you grow up? Where did you come from? What kind of environment? And there's ways to just do these randomly, or there's ways to select them. And so you can grow up on another species world, and there's like 1,000 options because they have one for every species, and there's a ton of species in the game. Or you can just say, well, I grew up on my homeworld, Bajor, done. And then that will give you the chance to boost another attribute, and it will let you, we'll boost our insight just for fun. And then you can select a discipline. And so this is where we start raising those. And so this is, the values are what I really love about the characters more than any other aspect of the character creation system. And this is the reason that I wanted to get this far into the character creation. I'm not going to make you sit through the entire thing. But what I love about the values is, again, they don't have a direct mechanical effect. It's just something that you like about your character. So, like it says here, this value should reflect the environment and culture the character was raised with. It is a good opportunity to consider how the character views their own culture and how they connect or possibly don't connect to the philosophies and traditions of their people. So, we can write anything here. And it's just like a single sentence or a headline kind of thing, a bullet point that says something important about the character. And so if we want to say, for example, that this Bajoran character was raised during the occupation, something that relates directly to the environment that they grew up in, maybe their value is every man for himself, dog eat dog, do what you can to survive. Or maybe their value is, we have to work together to get through this. Their value can be anything like that. Death to Cardassians. Whatever you decide you want to do. I kind of like the idea, we have to work together to get through this. And I think I spelled all those words correctly. And so then that becomes a thing that you can use when you are trying to do stuff with your character. So let's go back and take a look at the character sheet, which is not there, right there. Okay. So you will have all of these values, and you put the values right here. And when you are able to, when you're trying to do a task, you're trying to fix the warp core, you're trying to, study a new alien species or whatever it is you're trying to do, if that action, if that roll of the dice uses a value, if it relates to one of those values in some way, then you are able to spend determination points on that. You're able to interact with it differently. And so it changes the way that you as a character go. And the primary form of character advancement in the game, it doesn't really have experience points. It doesn't really have leveling up. What it does have is a system where you can modify those values as you go on. As you play through the game. We go back to this. We gave our guy this thing of we have to work together to get through this, right? If we had decided that we wanted to start this character off with a really dark one, like every man for himself, then that could be a great character arc for the character. Is, how is that value going to change over time, and how does what they learned as a kid change the way, change as they grow and as they interact with the rest of their crew on their starship and all these other things. And so the ability to interact with those values and change them as time goes on through role playing is just a really well done, kind of beautiful way of doing things. So it's awesome, and I rave about this game. It is one of my top 3 role playing games, probably ever. I absolutely adore it. Let's take a look again. Let's go back to the book. I'm looking through the table of contents right now to see some other stuff to show off. The next 2, Alan asked, are the next 2 going to be my next segments? The next 2 what? My next 2 favorite games ever. I know I'm going to get to them. I've got them on my calendar. I am going to get to both of them this month, definitely. For those who are interested, the other ones are The One Ring and Pendragon. All 3 of those top 3 Danwell's favorite RPGs of all time are games that Alan Barr introduced me to. So, Alan, thank you for being here to be a part of this, and thank you for introducing me to those awesome games. What was the other thing that I wanted to show off? Character creation obviously goes on for several more steps, and you add a bunch of cool new things, and there's more talents, and there's more values that you get to add. But I wanted to show off. I can't remember what I wanted to show you. Maybe it was the Starships? Yeah, let's take a look at the Starships. Because another thing that this game does really well is it gives every member of the crew something useful to do. And there are, in the GM kit, they actually have a great set of handouts, and we'll get to that eventually as well in a future review. It's got, the kind of standard GM screen, but then all these really great handouts. Like if you're the chief security officer, what can you do? What actions can you take when we get into a fight? If you're the chief medical officer, what can you do while the starship is flying around and scanning nebulas and fighting Klingons and stuff? There's a lot of really great things. And so let's have a look at some of this. They've got, all the different systems that a ship can interact with, and a lot of suggestions of how that all works. And then, once we get into it, actions aboard a starship, which we don't have here. Okay. So there's all of these specific actions that you can do, and this is a lot of information, I admit, up front. And both times that I have played this game and gotten into a big space battle, I made sure to create, because I didn't at the time have the GM kit, handouts to give to the players so that they would know what they could do. The helm obviously has a lot going on in the middle of a space battle. What exactly do they have? How can the captain contribute to that fight? So it's not just the helm flying and the tactical officer firing the guns. What does everybody else do? There's a ton of other really cool stuff that you can do, and the book breaks it all down based on, are you the navigator? Are you the communications person? What are you doing? And what is your role, and how can you take part in this spaceship battle? So it does a good job of that, and I really enjoy that aspect of the game as well. Oh, here we go. Here's more bridge positions, which give you as well a lot more actions that you can do. So there's a lot of neat stuff. And then, when we were looking at the character creator online, you may have seen that, one of the options we didn't click because we were trying to create a character was the option to create a starship. Let's actually have a look at that character creator again, because we can go back here in history and go all the way back to the beginning. We clicked everything. We want to do a next gen. So we could create a starship, and this does a great, there's all the different classes, and so you can pick what kind of basic class you are if you want to be Galaxy class like the Enterprise D. And then as we click through this, you can see all these other options appearing, like what is your mission profile? Sure, you're a Galaxy class, but are you designed for diplomatic operations? Are you designed for reconnaissance? And so there's a lot of fun customization you can do with that. But the main thing I want to show you here is this, supporting characters. Because the crew of your starship is obviously much, much larger than just the 3, 4, 5 players that you have at the table. And so Star Trek Adventures has a really great system that allows you to kind of incorporate all of those supporting characters, all of the extra characters. Imagine that someone's actually playing an episode of Star Trek Next Generation. If imagine one of those episodes as a gaming session, and the main characters are Picard and Riker and, let's say, Worf and Crusher. Okay, and so you've got all that going on, and you've got those main players, and they all have their specific jobs, and they're working together. But then an engineering problem happens, and you're like, well, crap, none of us have a really fantastic engineering skill. How are we going to deal with this? And the game will let you, once per session, I think, if I remember correctly, once per session, just create a new supporting character or draw on a pre-existing supporting character. And so you say, well, we need to have a chief engineer, so we're going to make one. And then they've got a really quick system that makes kind of a truncated version of an actual character. It's much shorter, much simpler than a full character sheet, and you can whip one out in just a minute and say, okay, well, this is Geordi LaForge. He is our chief engineer. And so for this scene, instead of playing as Riker, I'm going to play as Geordi LaForge. I'm using these as examples. Obviously, you can play your own characters. You don't have to play the ones from the show. And so for the duration of that scene, then, you are this different supporting character. And then that character exists for the rest of your campaign. And whenever you need to go back to them, whether it's an engineer or a helm or whatever it is, just a red shirt to go down to the away mission or whatever, you can draw on that character, and that character can kind of build and grow over time and change in some ways. It's a really, really cool system. And when we have done it, we did a brief campaign. I think we got through 6 or 7 sessions, and we separated them into episodes. And we were all hardcore Star Trek geeks at the time. This was me, Alan Barr, Steve Diamond, Ethan Sproat. We went through, I think that was it. No, Brian McClellan maybe was, no, this was before him, before he joined our RPG group. Anyway, we were all big Star Trek geeks, and so we preloaded most of our supporting characters. We built the full roster of all the executive officers and the rest of the important staff, kind of as if we were casting our own version of the TV show. And so whenever we got into that situation and we're like, well, we really need someone who can analyze this star chart, well, we already knew we had a stellar cartographer. We had this science officer who specialized in that kind of stuff. And so we were able to pull that guy out, and one of the characters, one of the players played as him for the scene, and we were also able to kind of change that character, this little stellar cartographer. What we did not have was a science officer who specialized in holograms, and for the specific scenario that we were in for that episode, we needed that. And so that guy, you can, every time you use a character in an episode, you get to modify them a little. And so that guy ended up with some cool, like, photonic science, whatever it was, to make him better at being a hologram science guy. And hologram science guy was his official title. You know. So then over time, over the course of the next few episodes, he kind of grew and he changed because we had given him this extra discipline, and he started studying holograms. And he was just a really fun character. It was so neat to watch the crew kind of change and modify itself over the course of the campaign that we played. So anyway, Star Trek Adventures, it is a really wonderful game. There's a lot of great supplements for it that we'll be getting to in future episodes of this show. There's one each for the three main divisions: Command, Science, and Operations. There's a book about the Beta Quadrant, a book about the Alpha Quadrant. There's 2 different books of little adventures that you can do. And then, of course, the fantastic GM kit. And they're putting out new books all the time. So check it out. Have a look at it. This is, let's go back and show you the cover again. Star Trek Adventures. Really, honestly, one of my favorite role-playing games of all time. Boom, there's the cover. So anyway, I hope that this was fun review to watch. It was fun for me to do. I love geeking out about these things. So give it a chance, and I'll see you again. I'm going to do another one of these tomorrow, and we're going to look at the core game of the new edition of L5R. So until then, I will see you later. Bye.